chat, and that way everyone else doesn't see.
Oh, broadcast is live.
Hey, you know what you could have? Nah, that's all right.
Okay. So we are live. We are live. Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing good this Friday or night, and that you've certainly enjoyed your day. I'm going to turn this phone off to make sure it's not beeping in the background. But our host is still working on his volume there, so hopefully he'll be joining in a moment. So if you're wondering why Stephen isn't saying anything, that is why. Okay, but we just want to welcome our very special guest tonight. What we have here tonight to follow up on the discussion that we had last night is about domestic violence, and of course, it's a very important subject. And we're hoping tonight to kind of expand on what we talked about last week with our very special guests. I'm going to have them to introduce themselves in a moment. And we're going to go from there, kind of take some discussions. Do want to hear from the audience, of course, and get feedback from you. Last week, it was a little quiet. So I'm not sure if that's because it's, an uncomfortable subject to have discussion. But we need to talk about it and we need to be about it. So maybe we can shed some light on things that you can do to have a healthier relationship, because after all, that's what the Doctor of Love show is all about. Love and relationship matters. So at this time, without any further ado, I'm going to start with our special guest that we have this evening, and they're going to introduce themselves. So why don't we start with, let's see, ladies first. So
That's right. That's right.
You're glad I said that, right? We'll do ladies first. So why don't we start with Mildred? Mildred, if you could just tell everyone who you are.
Yes, ma'am. I am Mildred Muhammad. I'm an award-winning global keynote speaker. I am a certified consultant with the Office on Victims of Crime. I am a speaker for the U.S. Department of State, domestic abuse survivor, and I'm the former wife of the DC sniper.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us, Mildred. And I am sure you have a lot that you can share. And I'll talk a little bit more about myself here in a moment. I think I may be getting ahead of everyone. Hopefully we have some people who are signing on if they haven't already. And why don't we go with you next, Simi?
Yes, my name is Ulysses Simi Braxton. I'm a talk show host on the J. King Network. I've been there about 8 years and a community activist. And I'm just, here. I'm excited to be here on the show. I've been watching you guys, and I've been, Steve been putting me on his Rolodex. He finally scheduled me to be on this show. I really loved watching the show, and so I finally got an opportunity to be here. So here I am, and I just, I'm just going to bring my best.
All right. Okay. Thank you so very much. And I am Lind Hart Streeter, that is, and I am a marriage and family therapist. I am a life coach, behavior coach, and relationship coach is what I do. And I'm also an author. I've written a couple of books. One is called The Power of Conflict, if you could kind of see that a little bit. Okay. And this is really great guide on relationships and conflict and how we can resolve those conflicts without resorting to violence. And that's a big problem nowadays, because I think people need to learn how to talk, and we have not learned how to have civil dialogue and conversations. And then my second book is all about love and relationships. It's called The Art of Manifesting Love. And, here, this guide here is about the power of love, how great it is to experience love, and how we can have the best love. So how do we manifest love in our lives? And I will say, as a prefaces to everything that's written there, is that we have to have good mental health and good emotional health in order to develop in ways that we can communicate better. Yeah. So, at this time, Stephen.
Incidentally, if Steve doesn't show up today, if he doesn't, get on, can I come back next week too?
I may need you, right? If we're going to do this. So let me see who we have just joining us so far so that we can do a nice welcome to them. I see Gina, it looks like. So glad to have you with us tonight. And I see you just shared it as well. So thank you so very much for liking and for sharing. And we're going to be waiting around a little bit to have other guests to pop on with us too. And hopefully, everyone, our major person who's responsible for the Doctor of Love, Stephen Pierce, he's coming on. You can see him on your screen, I'm sure, but where he's working on his volume. And we just had Pam to join us. Hi, Pam. How are you this evening? And okay, and Michael, just noticed that's Michael Meyer. Hi there, Michael. How are you? Hope you're doing well too. And so we'll move forward and just kind of talk a little bit. Let me kind of do a little prefaces, and then last week when we brought up the subject of domestic violence, number one, I just thought since we're having love and relationship discussion, it would be just remiss of us not to even talk about violence in relationship, because that is a big problem. Domestic violence, I think I explained that last week, but domestic violence refers to all types of family violence. It may be violence against children, violence against the elderly, and certainly violence in marriages as well, or against other family members. And intimate partner violence, which is IPV referred to sometimes, has to do with violence that takes place within the partnership of a relationship, an intimate relationship between two people. The violence may not be against the children, against parents, or anyone else, but certainly within the relationship itself. And as we know, if you watch any news at all, we get a chance, an opportunity every single day to hear the sour and bitter news of someone losing their life, whether it be homicidal or suicidal, not to mention those that are not recorded, that are experiencing violence in high degrees and find themselves in hospital, or showing up for other medical experience. So with that being said, I won't go through all the statistics again because we know it is high. And one of the things that I talked about last week was the fact that if you have sometimes violence is experienced the highest rate between ages of 18 and 25. And my comment to that was, if you have a daughter within that age range, there's a possibility that your daughter, because I think it was like 1 in 3 young girls who are subject to the influence and the violence of a boyfriend, who controls what she does, who she talks to, and may to some degree get physical with her too. So those are signs to look for with your own daughters, and to have conversations with them about what violence look like. Sometimes it's misconstrued as love, as he's jealous or he cares about me. And yeah, I use he a lot. Although men do experience violence in a relationship, we know that the rates for women are much higher than men. So with that being said, hopefully we will get an opportunity. I want to kind of lend some of our discussion tonight toward the impact of mental health in relationships, and what are some signs that we should be aware of, certain personality disorders with people that you're in a relationship with. It says, it's just who I am, and it skews the behavior, whether it be violence verbally or a situation whereby it's actually physical violence against someone. So how do we identify, what do we need to do? And I really believe in our community, especially, we can do a lot better at taking care of our mental health. So I'm not going to go any further at this point because I do want to hear from my guest. And maybe if you all can just tell us, especially you, Mildred, a little bit about what you discovered or what you're doing now, what led you to where you are. And by the way, since some of our guests are just coming on, you can tell them again briefly who you are too before you start your discussion or what you want to share.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Again, I'm Mildred Muhammad. I am an award-winning global keynote speaker, certified domestic violence advocate, domestic abuse survivor, and I'm the former wife of the DC sniper. What brought me to this work is that case.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The abuse that I suffered was not physical. 80% of victims do not have physical scars who prove that they are victims, and up to 75% who try to leave an abusive relationship are either hurt or killed. When I'm sure you all heard of the DC sniper and everything that happened with that case. However, not many people know my story, which asked him for a divorce because he was cheating. He said he didn't want one. I said, well, I do. He moved out, started to come in the middle of the night, would lean over, look at me, listen to me breathe, and leave out of the house. So I was able to get a restraining order. The judge gave me a lifetime restraining order because he said that I needed to get away from this guy. And I told him that I'm trying to do that. However, there was visitation still included in the restraining order. And that's a window of opportunity. That's what I call it, when you go to court for a restraining order and you have to go back to court for a custody order. But that window of opportunity is the time when the abuser will take the children and sometimes kill them to punish the victim for leaving the relationship. So on a weekend visitation, he took them and didn't bring them back. Took them out of the country. He took them for 18 months. I didn't know where they were. The people around me knew where they were and didn't tell me. I had to go into a shelter. I passed out because I lost 3 units of blood, stressing about my children. They put me in the hospital and they told me that I couldn't go home, but I needed to change my name, change my clothes, and they had to hide me so that he was not able to find me. I was on the run with all of that for 2 years. My sister called me from Maryland, asked me to come here to help to take care of my mom. I went to the FBI to tell them that my children were no longer in the country. They said they wanted to put me in the middle of a parking lot and use me as a decoy in order to lure him out. And I said no. I got my children back 18 months later. A year after that is when the shooting started. They told us to look for two Caucasians in a white box truck, which is that we did. I was looking for that, and I was looking for John. At no point did I think, feel, or believe that the sniper was my ex-husband. Law enforcement came to my home, asked me when was the last time I had seen him. I told them at an emergency custody hearing in September of 2001. They took me down to the police station and told me that they were going to name my ex-husband as the sniper. They put me and my children in protective custody. A day later is when they caught him. The community began to blame me once they found out that I was here. They said if I would have stayed with him, then he just would have killed me. If I would have stayed on the West Coast, then the people on the East Coast would still be alive. How dare I call me and my children victims when none of us were hurt or killed? And how dare I bring this drama into this quiet community? So, with all of that being said, I did not argue with anyone. That was the highest level of victim blaming that I experienced. I was trying to get my children counseling. Unfortunately, this was a high profile case, and every counselor that we went to was trying to be famous. So I went to the library, I got a book on counseling, and I learned how to counsel me and my children myself. I needed to make sure that my children were emotionally balanced so that they could grow up to be emotionally balanced adults. They wanted to talk about their dad. Of course, I had to do that. I had to push all of my stuff aside because regardless of what you call him, regardless of what anybody says, and regardless of what he's done, he is their dad. And so I said, you can love him. We can talk about him. I am the best person that you can ask. I will tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly, even if it makes me look bad, because we have to get through this as a family and we have to get through this emotionally well. So, time for the execution. They wanted to go to the funeral. I took them because they needed to say goodbye. And once they did that, we got on the plane. We came home. I could see that cloud of pain being removed from their shoulders. And so now my son is 31, engaged, just got a manager at a new store at Sunglass Hut. He went to Louisiana Tech. My daughters, Selena and Taliba, my son's name is John. My daughters, Selena and Taliba, they both went to colleges in Ohio, both graduated in vocal performance and both sing classical music in 8 different languages. I have made this my life, domestic violence, to help as many people, men and women and children, who find themselves suffering from domestic violence in silence. And since the pandemic, domestic violence has become a pandemic within a pandemic.
Yes.
And it is very difficult for victims to get help. I've written a book called Being Abused While Teleworking, to give tips to not just the victims, but to the employers on how they can help victims who may be brutalized or unfortunately beaten during this pandemic, on how to help them without putting them in further danger.
Wow.
And I appreciate being on the show. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, thank you for being here too, because what an experience, first of all, to have to go through, and your children to be a survival, and to have them in a position that they can still be successful with their life. And what
Absolutely.
I have to say, most definitely, one of the things I talk about is that children learn resiliency from their parent
Mhm.
or parent, whether it be one or two. And I can see the resiliency just yours in, through your children.
Yes, ma'am.
And because it takes a lot of mental and emotional strength to overcome that type of pressure and abuse.
Well,
And
I told them that they couldn't use their dad as a reason for failure. You got to come with one better than that. You can't go around here saying my dad is a DC sniper and I can't make it. Nope.
Mhm.
Give me something better than that.
Wow.
For me, that was the highest.
yes,
So if you can't go higher than that, then you don't have a reason not to succeed.
Yeah.
alrighty. Did you have something you want to come in or say add to that, or tell more about yourself, Simi? And then we'll get back.
What an incredible story. What an incredible story. And I commend you for being able to get through it. I mean, and to, your children are living, a relatively normal life.
Mhm.
Domestic violence, you mentioned earlier, Linda, about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And, mental health has been in our community, has been a stigma. We put, Uncle Bobo in the back room. When I was growing up, they never acknowledged it or brought it to the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
Being raised in the church, they would say, well, pray for them. And when they need medication or when they need counseling, some things prayer, it's just not enough. You have to be able to go out there and just get some help for it. I too have been a victim of domestic violence. There's
Okay.
a lot of times people think that it's just the female that domestic violence can be, they can be the recipient of a domestic violence. But I've dealt with it too myself, because I would never put my hands on a woman, but I had a woman put her hands on me.
Mm-hmm.
And when you experience this, it puts you in a very precarious situation, because when it happened, she ended up getting hurt, and just because I'm a man and because I was stronger, she ended up getting hurt, and I was trying to defend myself. Long story short, she ended up in the hospital. We both knew what happened. I had my hand. She thought I had the keys to the house. She wanted to put me out the house, and I wouldn't leave. And she thought I had the keys in my house, which I had was a fingernail clipper, a little small fingernail clipper. It was just shiny. And I put my hands behind my back like this. And so she reached over my back. She stood up and reached over my back and grabbed the key. Tried to grab my hand. And I stood up like that. And when I stood up, she ended up flipping over my shoulder, over my back, and she dislocated her shoulder. We go to the hospital. And we both knew what happened. I told her it was an accident. Told them it was an accident. Next thing I know, they send me home. It was in the 90s. They send me home, and when I go home, I wake up the next morning, and 2 police are at the door. And when they opened the door, they said you were under arrest. So I ended up going to jail. They sent me home. They thought that she was a very afraid, female, she was afraid to say anything in front of me. But I ended up going to jail. And I never really ever initiated anything when it came to the domestic violence thing. I mean, it was just that it was always on me. I mean, always on her. She initiated it, from throwing ketchup bottle, just little things, grabbing me by the testicles. If she get mad. And I found out this, and I'm gonna let somebody else talk. I found out that a lot of times people go through things when they're younger. I found out that when she was younger, she had issues with her stepfather because from her stepfather, or some man, I ain't gonna say it was him, but it was around the time that her stepfather was around, that touched her in an inappropriate way, or that was touching her. It was something that went on that was inappropriate. And when she went to her mother, she told me this. Her mother slapped her when she said that something was going on. And I think that a lot of times when people go through things in their past, and something happens to them to where they have an anger inside of them, and they put that anger out, or they show that anger in the relationship, because she had issues with her father. And I think that a lot of times that's what happens. People have things that, past traumas that they bring into relationships. And when you bring that to the relationship, they never get help for it. And when they don't get help for it, they end up, manifesting into the relationship in a very negative way. So, and I got through it. I felt guilt. I felt hurt. I was hurt because it was, in the 90s, it was always against the man. The man did it automatically. It was just like, well, you were responsible, and I promise you, to this day, I'll say that was a total accident. I stood up, she flipped over, and she the one that got the most. I was working out all the time. I was stronger, but I was just trying to get her off me. She was all on me. But that was the time where, you'd have to do the class for, 6 months. Every week you have to show up for the domestic violence class. And then after that 6 months, you have to go once a month. And you better not miss. If you miss, you got to do the whole thing all over again. I was incarcerated for maybe 2 months, 3 months. It was ridiculous. Still had my job when I got out. The people loved me enough on the job. I still kept my job. I don't know how. Well, it was a act of God that I had my job, but I kept my job. And but the violence, the domestic violence, and the mental and the physical abuse, the mental abuse did not stop. The verbal abuse, right. It did not stop. I had to leave, and when I left, she wouldn't let me take my clothes or anything. You see what I'm saying? And when I left that relationship, she finally put my clothes, everything that I had, in one bag. And it was cut to shreds. I'm talking about my underwear, my shoes, I didn't have anything. I left there with one work uniform and a pair of jeans. And the violence didn't stop. So go for it.
Wow.
So I know the reason that you were arrested is because the physical assault. That's how they looked at it. It's although she flipped over, you didn't have any scars or scratches or marks on you. She did. And so therefore you were the aggressor.
And the marks that I had, you couldn't see.
Correct.
Yeah.
Unless I took my clothes off.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And it's still that way today. If law enforcement shows up, whichever party has physical scars from the abuse, then they're perceived as the victim, and the other party is perceived as the abuser or perpetrator, and which is really sad. What I hope start to happen is that we can start either from a systemic perspective, that we start to deal with the issues of why people are violent. Because we get restraining orders. And I know when I worked in family court, sometimes that make matters worse, because when a person gets a restraining order, it's like, now I'm going to show you that you can't stop me from coming to my home, or whatever the case is they want to do. And Simi, I'm glad you're here to talk about it from your perspective, because certainly there are many men who are caught in a cycle of abuse with their partners. However, they don't report it most of the time because of course, it's not one of the bright, the best things or look in terms of image on a person's ego, a man's ego, as to why, what I'm going to tell them that my wife slapped me, or, pulled a knife on me or whatever. So they tend not to talk about it. And in most cases, we know that women are really stuck. And one of the things I talked about last week was that abuse does not start with the physical initially. It's always in this cycle. And Mildred, I'm sure you're familiar with that power and control wheel, where
Yes, ma'am.
it may start with the isolation, if there's the emotional abuse behind it, because the goal is to break you down first to get total
Yeah. Yeah.
control. And now I've created enough fear to get you where I need to be. But what I want to, Mildred, I know you want to make a comment, but I also have a question for each of you. And Mildred, you can address that question too at that point. But I'm just curious, because here I look at sometimes some of the warning signs, like how do you know you enter a relationship with someone who's abusive or controlling? What were the signs? At what point did you recognize that? And what do you think kept you in the cycle as long as it did before you got there? Mildred, you can make your point, and maybe if you could kind of answer that question first.
The first assault to domestic abuse and violence is a verbal assault. It's what
Mm-hmm.
I say to you, and it's how you interpret what I say. I believe we need to stop asking victims how long or why did you stay, and start asking the abuser, why do you abuse? And the reason I say that is because when you ask a victim, well, how long did you stay? What made you leave? And why? What were the signs that you missed? You are putting the total responsibility of an abusive relationship on the victim. And she or he is not at fault. It is the abuser who is at fault for the total abuse in the relationship.
True.
So it doesn't matter how long I stayed. It doesn't matter what I did or did not do. The abuser is the one that should be held responsible and should be held accountable for the chaos and the terror that he or she imposes upon their family.
Mm-hmm. So, what warning
Warning signs.
did you
A
get?
warning sign to me may not be a warning sign to you,
Right.
based upon the mental health, based upon how people are raised. Some
Mm-hmm.
people are raised in chaotic households, and some people are not. I wasn't raised in a chaotic household, but other people are. So the signs for me may not be the signs for them. Someone, if you have a boundary, and this is how create the I answer the question, what are the signs? Because every sign doesn't apply to everyone. And we can Google and find out what the signs are for an abusive relationship. If you have a boundary and that person crosses that boundary, that's your first sign. You get a feeling in your chest, you get a gut feeling that this is not the way I want to be treated. That's your sign.
Mm-hmm.
When you abusers know from the gate they're going to abuse you. We don't always know that. We don't sign up to be in an abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm.
We don't sign up to say, an abuser doesn't come up to you and say, so Sunday I'm going to beat you and Tuesday I'm going to emotionally traumatize you. Is that okay with you? They don't do that. It's a
Right.
gradual thing that occurs. And about 90 days or so, or sometimes it's 60 days, once you get comfortable in the relationship, and that person knows that you have told all your family and friends how wonderful you are, God sent you, oh my God, this is the man or woman for me, that's
Mm-hmm.
when the abuse starts, because they know at that point you are not going to tell family and friends that you are in an abusive relationship, because they're going to question you. As I thought you was a good judge of character. I thought you would notice the signs. I thought that you were smarter than that. I thought. And when you come at a victim like that, they will never come to you for help. My brother was there with me And he said, John was just playing. John said, you have become my enemy. And as my enemy, I will kill you. I went to my brother. My brother said, oh, he's just playing. I never went back to my brother again because I, as a victim, don't have time to break down to you all of the abuse that's happening to me. You either going to help me or you're not. And if you're not, get out of the way so that I can find somebody who is going to help me to get out of that situation. Every victim knows they are victims of domestic violence. Mm-hmm. Every victim want to leave, but every victim doesn't know how.
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right. And I have some other things I'm going to share too. The reason I had asked you that question too, because in doing some of the research, there are certain personalities that you can kind of see warning signs. Just say when you meet someone initially, maybe the way they handle other people, sometimes you can, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. I want to hear from Simi, what your response to the question.
Well, I mean, being I had one opportunity to.
Let me ask you this.
We had an incident.
The question initially, was she a mean person when you first met her?
Yeah. Was she a mean person?
Mm-hmm. Or to not just specifically to you, but in her behavior to be mean toward other people.
She was a very pretty girl. She had an attitude, like when everybody would come around. It was her own personal insecurities, but I knew that. But she was very overbearing. Anytime we were somewhere, we had, for instance, a banquet we went to, and I knew a lot of people there. When I was at the banquet, I was, being congenial, and she walked over there and said, "You're supposed to be with me," and it was just, those type of scenes. She would always put a scene on, like, in front of people, very embarrassing. And one of the things that I had, that was a time when I think my self-esteem was being attacked to the bitter end, because I would leave, and then I come back. It was one of those things where I would get away from it, and then I end up coming back. But I felt trapped, and I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to be there. I wanted to, I didn't get married to be divorced. I wanted to do everything that I possibly could to not make that mistake and have to be divorced. But it was a dead end street for me. It was a dead end street for me. And then I just had to walk away and leave everything that I had there. And I had to basically.
Oh, uh-oh. Oh. I think Simi dropped off on us there somewhere, didn't he? Yes, so he will probably be back on. He lost his connection. And Mildred, I was asking that question because I think, like one of the things I try to do, and especially having worked in family court for a number of years, was like, back to the whole mental health aspect, what are our signals? What's that instinct? Because you're right, not every approach is the same when you start talking about an abuser. And then some personalities, there are, when you start doing diagnosis in the mental health aspect, you have major mental health disorder, which you usually access when diagnosis. That this is when people are schizophrenia, major depressive disorder. They were like really, really out there crazy. But most of what we deal with in mental health has to do with personality disorders. And there are some very difficult. There's one book that we did when I was working as a mediator. There are some difficult personalities, and some of these things you can see initially in people. And so when we start talking about personality disorders, now we're talking about personality in which it's a mental health in which you have a rigid and unhealthy pattern of thinking. The person does. They have an unhealthy pattern of thinking, functioning, and behavior. It's a person with a personality disorder. They have trouble perceiving and relating to situations and people as the reality of what's common. They tend to be very indifferent about the way they see life or the way they see the world. And it causes significant problems within relationships. And what I've noticed too, as a counselor in court, is that sometimes some people will say, Yeah, I noticed that they were this way. And when I say personality disorder, we're talking about something at a level of something called, usually all the cluster B personality disorder, like narcissistic personality disorder. The person who's insensitive to anybody else's feeling, they have grandiose ideas about who they are, and this is how they manage their relationship from the onset. They can do push up, put downs, and so forth, and have no remorse for anything they do because it's all about me. And I
John, none of that.
he didn't have any of that,
No,
any of
ma'am.
that going on. Okay.
He
And
was he was polite to everyone. Everybody loved John. He was the life of the party. When he was in the military, everybody had to be around him. He took care of people. He took care of his soldiers. He made sure that everybody was taken care of. So all of those, no,
no,
nothing.
none of
Zero.
that. And,
Nada.
yeah, and another piece of
And so
information.
when I hear, I understand the mental health piece. I really do. I really do. However, abusers are not mentally ill. They know exactly
What
what
they're
they're
doing.
doing and how they're doing it. They know how to spin it to
Yeah.
where other people will feel it is the victim and not
Mm.
the abuser.
And you
John
know,
was very good at. He could read a room. He knew what he could say. He could read a room.
yeah.
He
And what I was
knew
going
what was going to happen if he
to,
said a certain thing, and
and
it happened.
you know what, and that's the difference between mental illness and personalities.
And
Yeah.
I respect your work. I do.
Uh-huh.
I'm not trying to go.
Right.
I'm not. What I'm saying to you is this:
Hmm.
when we start to label
Hmm.
abusers as mentally ill, we
There we go.
take the true people
Hmm.
who are, and we don't take their issues seriously, because now everybody has a mental illness, and for me it needs to go where it should be. Abusers know what they're doing. I know the narcissistic personality. I got it. Trust me, I got it. I
Hmm.
understand. John knew exactly what he
What
was
he
doing.
was doing.
He took his military career and brought it into the civilian sector. He knew, he had it written out on a computer. If he did this for good, you would call him a genius. He used it for evil, and you say he's mentally ill. No, ma'am. I
Hmm.
cannot listen to the victims when they tell you who this person is, man or woman.
Hmm.
Listen, we don't listen to the victims
Hmm.
because we want to diagnose the abuser, and well, no, that's not what he does. That's not what. Trust the victim. She
Hmm.
lives with them or her. She knows what he or she will do. She understands, or he understands, the pattern when they stay. It is a strategic move that they are doing. You just don't up and leave. It is a strategy to leave an abusive relationship.
Yes.
Takes strategy to understand the mental capacity of the person that's living in your house, to make sure that you're safe and your children are safe and even the community is safe. So when I go to you and I say, Doc, he's going to kill me. I went to the governor. I went to the police. I went to all these people. You know what they told me? Ain't nothing wrong with you.
Uh-huh.
And look what happened.
And see,
And look what happened.
and you know what? So let me kind of preference or clarify what I was saying, because
Yes, ma'am.
that was in no means or intentions to.
It was not. It was not received that way. I
Oh, okay,
promise.
good.
It was
Good.
not at
Give
all.
them the whole pass. No.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Because
No,
that's
ma'am.
one thing I want to say,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I don't think it's a mental health issue. I
Mhm.
think it's personality, and I think that personalities, yes, they are manipulative. They know exactly what they're doing,
Mhm.
and so where my education piece come in at is to help victims early on, even start to identify what are some of the warning signs or signal paying attention to what a person is saying to you, listening to, I mean, what's their background or whatever. But the point is to, I just think that every little thing can be a warning sign to, you know what, that's not normal, or, so it's certainly not to say that, no, they're mentally ill, they don't know what they're doing. No, that's a different, no, certainly didn't intend that.
Yes,
To me, I know we've been talking. And listen, let me say this too, to everyone, to the people, our audience who are listening. If you have questions or comments, feel free to chat. Everyone is quiet, no one is talking. But you can feel free to talk with us. Simi, I know you got cut off there, so you have to pick up with where you think you left off at.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was talking about self-esteem, my own personal self-esteem. It took me a while to get it back, and I'm I'm a pretty confident guy, but it, it can really wear on your self-esteem when you've been a victim of domestic violence, and
yes, it can.
when these type of things happen to you, it seemed like my whole world was crashing down on me, and I just it's just important that we find somebody, as Mildred was saying, that's going to really help us. I was fortunate enough to have family around me. I was unfortunate enough to I never received any counseling, immediate counseling. We got some counseling at the church, but that it wasn't as depth as it should have been. God can make it happen, and it was nothing that was practical. Things that needed to be done that that could really show some real progress in our relationship. But once I got away from it completely, I felt a freedom that I wouldn't trade the world for it. I got a freedom. And another thing that I had to do was I had to forgive her. That was one of the things that were the biggest thing that happened for me was my freedom came when I forgave her, and I forgave myself. Forgiveness is real important when it comes to going through something that traumatic, and then not repeating, and taking responsibility for what I did or for what the things that I should have done. I made her think that those were keys, and they weren't the keys to the house. I held something in my hand, but it wasn't the keys. I was just saying I had the keys, and it perpetuated that situation where she ended up in the hospital and I ended up in jail. So, I'm just, it was a lesson to be learned. I was in my 30s, early 30s, late 20s, and I learned something, that forgiveness and forgiving yourself is very, very important for an individual to move forward in something like that. And I commend you, Mildred. That's an incredible story that you have. Wow.
Okay.
Incredible.
Yeah, I have some questions here. Thank you for that comment. Comment.
That's pretty much it for me. I mean, as far as that I had a bitterness. It took me a while though. It wasn't easy for me to forgive her. I held a lot of resentment for a long time. I held resentment for a long time with that relationship. I just held it. But when I was free, I became free when I truly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think it seems like our volume may be kind of out there again, but we have about 15 minutes left. And can you hear me clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
You can. Okay. And what about you, Simi? I think you're behind the scene. Your voice is delayed. But at any rate, there are some comments there because what I'm hoping that we can at least do. And Mildred, I heard what you said about warning signs or that things are different for everyone. But I mean, one who speaks to abuse and what you've
Yeah.
learned, just to be able to say to someone
Okay.
else,
I,
what,
I I can hear
what,
you.
okay, thank you.
I
You
can
know,
hear you now. Yeah, I can hear you now.
okay, all right, good. Okay, so what I want to talk about a little advice because there was a question there. One person, Toy, wanted to know what makes an abuser not recognize their actions, and
They
that
recognize their actions.
well, we'll put it
They
this way:
know.
they
Abusers know what they're doing. They try to make you feel or believe that they don't, but they
do, they
do.
don't.
They know, they manipulate, they strategize, they test you to see if this is going to work, this or that. They know, trust me, they know everything they do, they know what they're doing. It's you who's having a difficult time with it because you are emotionally attached. Take a step back. Separate your emotions from the actual fact of the relationship. Actual facts. And
Yeah.
you will be able to see clearly what they're doing. You're emotionally attached. Take a step back, separate it, and
Hmm.
watch.
Okay, because again, when it comes to manipulation in relationships, people always know when they're manipulated. That's the one thing
Absolutely.
that makes relationship difficult. And
Yes,
the first form of attack is always on your mental
ma'am.
status, your
Yes,
mental
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
capacity, and your emotional capacity. Because if I can get you to
Mhm.
believe in me enough, if I can be convincing enough, every time I convince you of a little bit of inch, I take another inch. And
Right.
those inches grow into yards and then they turn into miles. And next thing you know, you're trying to figure out who in the heck am I? And
Correct.
maybe he or she, maybe they're right. Maybe it is me. So then you start to second guess yourself. So it's not
Correct.
that you don't recognize it, it's
Mhm.
that they're never going to acknowledge it.
Exact. And please love yourself. Love yourself because if you love yourself, you won't let people treat you any kind of way. You won't. You won't. You'll say, "Oh, oh, 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 no, I'm not. No, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not doing
Yeah.
that." When you
Yeah.
love yourself.
And
So go
oh,
ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
there was another question too. And I think, Simi,
Sure.
if you could kind of talk about that one, this may be because you
Sure.
talked about, the forgiveness and all, but another question is apologizing a part of the plan of action for the abuser to have their way to continue the abuse? Did you get, yeah, did you, is the apology a part of the plan for the abuse to continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It is.
Simi, what about you? Any comments for you on that one?
Can't hear.
You know,
We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
We
Can't
can't
hear.
hear you.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
The apology is a
you
part
know,
of it.
It is
I
a part
Okay.
of.
well, I thought about something just now. I had an opportunity. I didn't know. I didn't actually know that I forgave her.
Mhm.
You can't hear me?
We can now. Yes,
Oh, no. Okay. They can't hear me.
we can hear you now. If you
Yikes.
continue to talk.
Okay. Yikes. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Now we can't.
Oh, you can hear me now? Oh, can you hear me now? Okay. One of the things that I didn't know I forgave her, but I saw her when I was living in LA. We ran into each other. Oh shoot.
Just keep talking, because it keeps flying off.
Okay.
Just keep talking.
God. Still no hear me? Can't hear me now? Can you hear me now? No? Yikes.
Unplug it.
Hmm?
Unplug it and talk. Unplug it.
Right. Okay.
So the apology can be a part of the abuse. Is when you accept an apology after, and this is how you can measure if it's still happening. So this person does something to you. Oh, I'm so sorry. And you say, okay, no problem. I'll accept your apology. And then after that, it gets worse, because after an apology, it always gets worse, because what you're saying is, okay, I'm okay with you treating me this way when I accept your apology. And so the next time you do it, all you're doing is showing them steps on how to treat you. We teach people how to treat us. That's what we do. So the more you accept an apology and the worse it gets, get off the train.
Yeah. And what I would say to that, going into a relationship, and ladies, you hear me talk about this all the time about pushing the pause button. We shouldn't be so quick to run into relationships before you understand the personality type you're dealing with. Jealousy, selfishness, all of those are small behavior that set you up for disrespect. And then secondly, everyone, I always talk about boundaries in relationships. Every relationship require boundaries, because boundaries are the rules by which we're going to engage and interact.
Yes,
and if that's not clear, if it's not clear that you can call me a B or put me down, call me dumb, call me stupid, and I sleep in your face the same night of that, well, you are telling them now that it's okay to do that.
Right.
So boundary says that these are the things you can and can't do. And when this happens, this is the consequence. I'm out, and mean it.
Right.
Because every time you say you accept that apology, oh, I'm sorry, it starts happening in cycle. Abuse is silica. And it goes through the cycle. You go through the honeymoon phase, and it starts all over again. So that's the one thing that you have to be aware of yourself. And I think something else you mentioned, Mildred, with the little time that we have left, we talked about a safety plan. I mentioned it last week, and I actually gave out a number, because you can't just leave an abuser.
Right. I'm sorry. I just want to get my safety plan. Hold on.
Okay. You need a plan of action, because it doesn't happen that way. And I always tell anyone, you never leave a relationship with the other person present. That's just how I see it. But anyways, okay, so Mildred, I'll let you talk about the safety plan. I talked about it last week, and I did provide a number. I will put that number in the chat again while you do your talking on that.
So this is Planning My Escape. There are 8 steps. The number 8 means transformation. You are transforming from a victim to a survivor, because you are now taking your life back into your own hands. Each step is a different part of your life, telling your employer that you are a victim and you need to get help. Now, some you have to gauge your employer in order to make sure that you get the help that you need. Get a restraining order. Make sure you carry the restraining order with you in your purse. Have one in your car, because when that person violates that restraining order, you can call the police and you can show them that restraining order. I know some people don't want to get one, but a paper trail is important to get a restraining order. The most dangerous person in the world is someone who has nothing to lose. A restraining order is not a bulletproof vest. It is not going to keep a person from trying to hurt you or kill you if that is their intention. I had a restraining order, and John created this big plan the theory was he was killing innocent people to cover up my murder so that he could come in as the grieving father and get custody of our children. That's the story you don't know, because they wanted you to believe that 2 Black men in a Chevy had a stolen credit card that was going to embezzle the government for $10 million. Now, how crazy does that sound? They want to tell you it was a domestic violence child custody issue, because they would not have been able to get the death penalty. The foreman said he gave him the death penalty because they didn't want him to finish what he started, which was to kill Mildred Muhammad. I didn't know that, because they don't tell you that. That's the truth of the story. So you can go to my website, mildredmuhammad.com, to order your escape plan.
Okay.
Don't take it home.
Thank you.
Put it away. Give it to a friend. Don't take it home, please. Leave it at your office. Because the one thing that a victim has when she's trying or he's trying to leave an abusive relationship, it is the element of surprise. Don't put it on social media. Don't tell 8 or 10 of your friends. Only tell one trusted friend. You know who that friend is. That friend is going to say, what you need me to do?
Mhm.
What we doing? How we gonna do this? That's the friend you need to go to, because that friend will hold your secrets. There is, and a lot of people don't need to know this, there's an underground railroad for victims of domestic
Yes.
violence. And they transport you just like they did during slavery. When I pass you off, I don't know where you're going, what's going to happen. You get that new ID and all of that stuff. There is an underground railroad. I'm in contact with many women, and all they want me, and I asked them, how can I help you? Just tell them we're here. Don't forget about us.
Yeah.
Don't forget about us.
Yeah. Awesome. And and in addition to Mildred's website, if just knowing that there are services available to you if you find yourself in in a harmful situation, no one, not even mental and verbal abuse. I want you to know tonight that you are much better than that.
Absolutely.
You deserve more. You have more value than that. And no one should talk to you any kind of way until they break you down, break your spirit to make you feel that you cannot do any better. Because the whole goal of power and control is about crippling the victim.
Correct.
And make you feel you have no other options. So try also write the number down, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 800-799-7233. They're there to help with safety plans. This is where you get multiple people online. They can also create or help you find resources for a safe house. And yes, there are many safe houses out there that no one even knows that they are around.
You can also go to domestic shelters with the S.org. Type in your city and state, and all of the resources will come up so that you can see for yourself where those resources are if you need to get to them on your own. I will never tell a victim to stay. I will never tell anyone to put themselves in harm's way to help your friend. My friend called me and say, something's happening. I'm calling the police because I am not qualified, nor do I have the training to confront an abuser. And I don't know what that abuser has, and neither do you. Don't put yourself in harm's way trying to help your friend or family member. Call the police. They're trained to do that.
Absolutely. And, always remember, again, you are more valuable than that, and everyone deserves to be treated with love, kindness, and dignity. And don't underestimate people who are dealing with whatever trauma they've been through in their life, and they're hiding behind it, whether it be in the church or, in the public. Usually, abusers are usually nice in the public anyways, with other people, because that's the impression to give that they're the greatest person around. But you need to know and understand, what it feels like and what it looks like. I was going to put that number in the chat, but what I want to do, we have 2 minutes left, but I do want to give Simi an opportunity to share some advice that you would give a man who may be in an abusive relationship. What would you give them in terms of what help where do they go? Where's their help?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay. Well, what advice? The advice you got to be very observant on what you're dealing with before you get into it. Some people don't show their true selves until after you're with them. I saw in the chat, somebody said, "Did you really forgive?" When it showed up, did you really forgive her? Yeah, I did. I really forgave her, but that's when I became free. I never said I forgive you, but I had to forgive her internally. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I could have done for myself, is when I forgave her, not for her, but for me. I released everything, and I was able to move on with my life. And I was able to leave that burden of my past as a lesson. for me to take with me the lesson, but not the trauma into other relationships. So I think that, you have to be very, very observant. And I went for her beauty, her physical beauty. I did. And I was young, but I didn't go for the essence of who she was at the very level of her being as an individual, as a human being, as a person. I didn't look at that as closely as I probably should have. I wish the best for her to this day. But that was the biggest thing for me, being able to forgive myself and to forgive her so that I could be released.
Mm-hmm. All right. Awesome. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, those who join us tonight, I hope you were able to extrapolate something from this conversation that's going to be helpful for you, for a friend, for your sons, daughters, and most importantly, for yourself. That you take good care of yourself, recognize again your beauty, your value, and your own self-worth, because you are more valuable than what you may perceive as love, because love doesn't hurt. Okay. Love guards, love protects, it honors, it puts you above itself. It's not selfish, it's selfless, it gives. And if you're not receiving that in your relationship, as I always say, you never have to ask a person if they love you. If you have to ask them if they love you, chances are, there we go. What was that? They do.
They don't.
That's my comment. If you have to ask, they don't know.
Ask. You don't.
They don't, because love.
You gotta ask what we doing. You're not doing anything.
You're not doing anything. Exactly.
If I gotta ask for attention, you're not getting it. They don't want to give it. They don't want to give it.
Exactly.
They don't want to give it.
Exactly. There's some dysfunction there.
Those are the signs right there. If I gotta ask you for something, you don't want to give it.
Exactly.
So I'm out.
Don't want to give love, or you're not capable of doing so. And yes, people will deal with, I'm going to say this one last thing. I know we have to go because we're a little past 11, but listen here. It is important to be able to recognize signs of people and behaviors in folk. And a lot of people are still dealing with childhood trauma, PTSD, whatever the sort may be. Or maybe they were in relationships when they were coming up in their childhood where they were victims themselves, whether it was through sexual abuse, physical abuse, whatever the case may be. And this is what's engraved in their psyche. And they turn around and they teach people, or they do the same thing that they've learned throughout childhood. And there are signs that do show up in people. Educate yourself that you'll know. We have to be people expert to some degree. Figure out your own issues, as well as learn. The more you learn about yourself, the more you will learn how other people function and operate. Listen, we're at the close of this broadcast tonight of our episode, and I just want to thank Mildred so very much for being a part of our discussion, girl.
Yes,
you're such a winner, such a champion. And Simi, likewise for you for sharing your story, because again, men don't always talk about abuse because, they're men, you're going to talk. So thank you so very much for sharing that. And I hope, if anyone else is out there as a male, that they will feel enough courage to speak up, because the more you let abuse go, the longer it goes. There's no fun in it. And if you want to, I know you're doing some things too. If you all want to, I know Mildred, you gave your website, but you all can give them the last little touches on how they can reach you if someone has questions or comments.
Yes, ma'am. If you want to reach out to me for a question, just go to my website and leave a comment, and I answer within 24 hours. I'm also a certified professional and personal development consultant, which is a life coach. It's just a long name for a life coach. Mm-hmm. But I do that too. Mm-hmm. And always remember this. In Ephesians 2, God said he created you to be a masterpiece. Didn't say what you had to be. Didn't say what situation you had to be in. He said he created you to be a masterpiece. And my mother's favorite scripture was, haven't I commanded you to be strong and of a good courage? He didn't ask you to be strong. He commanded you to be strong. You got this. I know it may be hard if you're in an abusive relationship. You keep your head up, you stick your chest out, and you handle it. You be strategic and you move with care, and only tell one person what you're trying to do. Just one.
Yes. And never, and by the way, never threaten the abuser that you're going to leave them. Keep it
No,
to
keep
yourself.
that element of surprise.
That's to never, ever give them the slightest indication that you're planning your way out. Simi, you want to share information before we end this? Or
Well,
no?
I'm just happy to be here as long as I've been here. I've learned something, and if I can just stay on the screen, that would be awesome,
I know, right?
outstanding. But what a show! What a show, though! What a show! The content is in the care. The content is really good, and so I just I'm thankful to be here. I appreciate being here, and I just appreciate the opportunity. So thank you very much. You guys are outstanding.
Thank you so very much. And Stephen, our commander in chief here, the producer.
Maybe next week.
Next week, we will be better. Thank you so. I know, right? Thank you so very much for allowing the show to carry on in spite of your challenges. So everyone out there, if you all could just give a shout out for Steve for creating this platform that we can have these type of discussions, because I know for sure we have to heal our families. I became a marriage and family therapist because of family challenges. We have got to heal our families. We can do better. We can heal ourselves. Okay. So we're going to sound off tonight. Thank you all so very much for joining in, and we will talk to you all again next week. And I think Stephen is going to come back and disconnect us from live here. He normally does. And we kind of chat behind the scene for a moment.
Right.
But it's still rolling.